I'm going to go out on a limb and say something that I've never heard anybody say before, but I think that fear of abandonment and borderline personality disorder is akin to any fear that anyone else has. And I'm sure that will create some arguments from people or some disagreements, or you just kind of, taking it all in. But that's where my intuition is right now. And I like to follow my intuition because sometimes the DSM 5, it doesn't talk about certain things. So I think this is key. I think this is key. And my big reason for finding intuitive bits and pieces here and there is because how are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to make it better for people? How are we going to help them heal so that they don't have to go through life like this? You could, I'm thinking of something else too, but I'll save that for another video. But it's akin to the same thing. And let me tell you why I've stumbled upon this. I was working with a little girl who had an intense fear of severe separation anxiety, to the point where I'm like, this is no longer separation anxiety. This is fear of abandonment. And even though she's only 6 years old, I can see this could potentially be borderline personality disorder. And I know that people don't like to diagnose BPD until after somebody is an adult, because when you're a teenager, you can act out, your hormones are going nuts, you're individuating, you're trying to become your own person and be able to take care of yourself. So sometimes they can get little outrageous, or they may experiment with different things. So, but I think it is such a disservice not to diagnose BPD in young childhood, because I think that's the time when we cure it, when we heal it, when the brain is still forming. That frustrates me, because why are we waiting until somebody is an adult and their brain is already completely formed? So anyway, so I was working with this little girl quite a bit, and I've worked with plenty of kids who have separation anxiety. So separation anxiety is like fear of your parents leaving you. A lot of kids, when they start school at the beginning of the year, they're going to have some separation anxiety. They're going to cry because they've been around their parents the whole summer, or this is their first time coming to school and it's scary, and I've always been around mom and dad, that's it. But they usually get past it in about a week or so of, let's keep doing it, let's keep trying. Because with separation anxiety, you don't want to keep a kid at home and think that you're going to solve the problem. A parent can talk to that kid until they're blue in the face. Oh, you're going to be fine. I'm going to comfort you. I'm going to make you calm down. You'll be okay. And that does not work. You have to leave them at school. And eventually it subsides and the kid is okay. They get into their schoolwork and coloring and playing, and it resolves itself. But when you see a kid that goes on the entire school year and it never gets resolved, and then they're sent to therapy because there's something deeper going on. This kid has more of a fear of abandonment from their parents, whether it's genetic, whether it's how they have been parented. Maybe they didn't bond appropriately. But this particular little girl, I remember meeting with the mom, and the mother brought the 1 year old with her. And I had never seen, or maybe it's been a long time since I've seen a 1 year old look at me like that. And he would look at anybody who looked at him like that. Like, he would give the most evil, don't you touch me. He would lower his head and just look at you with this mean mugging, unnatural kind of vicious stare. And to be fair, when a kid is that age, they are attaching and they are bonding. And a lot of times they don't want anybody but their mother. And then at 18 months, they may switch over to their father, but they are learning that, wait a minute, me and mom are, so yeah, so it could be a natural part of his development. He may be just fine, but because of the intensity of this little girl's behavior, I'm like, he might have the same issue. This might be genetics. And to be fair, the mom was rubbing his back. She was comforting him. She was attending to his needs. She was getting him his bottle. She was just very, very attentive. So there could be some genetics going on. This little girl would also be going into intense rages, which we know can be part of borderline personality disorder, where she was saying extremely vulgar things to classmates. And these other kids are not speaking this way. They're not using that intense, like very adult language. Like, where are you getting this from? Where she's saying really ugly things to people, to the kids. Because at this point, I'm still in this school day and I want to go home and you're not listening. And so now I'm raging because I don't know what else to do with all of this pent up aggression, because I don't know if my mother still exists. I need to see her to know she exists. When she leaves, it's like I'll never see her again, which a kid with separation anxiety can feel some of that too, but it's not this deep where there's nothing you can do. So I think this is the kind of kid that's going to need intense, possibly years of therapy potentially. So, did I solve the problem? No. Did I recommend her to go to someone else for some deeper therapy? Yes. And not to say that I couldn't help this child, but it's difficult to find a solution. And that's what I was explaining to some people. I understand very well what's happening here. It's just, how do you cure it? Of course, everybody wants overnight cures, and that's not possible. So she probably does need some play therapy to work through some things. But yeah, so one day I just decided, you know what? Because anytime I deal with anybody with BPD, my temptation is to kind of do the get over it. And not in a disrespectful way, but in a straightforward way. Like, we're dancing around this thing that we're very aware of. You have a deep, intense fear of abandonment, whether you're fully aware of it or not, whether it brings a ton of shame, which it can for adults, is what I found. But it's like we're not addressing the problem because it might make it worse. If I point it out to you, are you going to act out more? If I point it out to you and we can't solve it, does it make your life even worse? It's tricky, but I think sometimes in counseling you do have to take some risks. So I did take a bit of a risk with her, and I talked to her about that fear directly. Like, are you afraid that your mother isn't going to come back? And I talked to her about I just was probably too direct, but I just decided, let's take a chance, because this has been going on for how long? So I talked to her directly. I told her, I don't want you to have this fear for your whole life, because it's going to be miserable. And I don't want you to feel this sad and this upset all the time. And I want you to do some acceptance that your mother is coming back. We did some practice things like, okay, let me go out of the room. I'm letting you know that even though I'm out of the room and you can't see me, I'm still here. I'm still existing. I'm right here. So you practice, you color, and I'm going to step out and show you that we're back. Then we practice doing some, okay, mom is going to leave you at school, but she always comes back. Let's practice. Okay, so this is the school door, and this is where you go in, and this is where we come out of, and just working through it. Did it work? No. I mean, it might have worked a little bit, but not much. And the problem with BPDs is people want quick fixes. This needs intense, ongoing, we're trying again. I'm not giving up on you. It's just a problem that in certain settings, there's not a lot of time to just completely devote to this person. The amount of time that they would need to heal. So, what I discovered from that interaction was this is a fear just like anybody else. And before you say, oh, you're reducing this to a fear of spiders or heights or a fear of public speaking or a fear of snakes, I am reducing it to that right now because I think we need to deal with it in bite-sized pieces. Might it be worse? It's worse because they're having to deal with this fear all the time. Whereas somebody else who has a fear of heights, how often are you going to have to deal with that fear of heights? You can avoid it and be just fine the majority of your life until you come to some stairs or an elevator. But so I'm not saying that it's not more intense, but I am saying that let's look at it from that viewpoint so that we can deal with it in a more bite-sized angle. So what I was wanting her to get over in a day, because we did all this work together, is when you ask anybody who has a fear to just get over it, can they? Absolutely not. The things that I was afraid of as a child, I am still afraid of. Have I had therapy for some of those things? Yes, I sure have. Did it solve the problem? Absolutely not. I remember when I was in college, we started having wasps coming in certain buildings, and I couldn't even stay in the class because I'm like, I'm not staying in here with this unpredictable flying object. And I even had some psychological tests done so they could get to the root of whatever. I took a lot of little tests and stuff like that. Everything came back great, like no disorders, nothing glaring or anything like that. But they said, what is more out of control than a flying insect? So it's about a core of it is about control, not knowing where it's going to go, not knowing what it's going to do, not knowing where it's going to bite you. And a lot of times when people have fears, the anxiety lands somewhere. It picks a place, right? So for some people, it might pick fear of heights. So I remember going with her to like look at dead wasp and like hold them or look at them closely. Then we were going to go to a country barn where they were flying around everywhere. As I forgot what you call that, but you know what I'm saying. Like exposure therapy type things, right? So the things that I originally have been afraid of, I'm still afraid of. And nobody could just say, get over it. And it's funny, one fear to another. It's funny to me, speaking of being sensitive to these things, is that somebody else could be so afraid of something that I'm not afraid of, like a dog or a puppy or a cat. But then when it came to my fear, I felt like, wow, people can be really insensitive. They're like, get over it. It's smaller than you. Just, it's no big deal. That's not being very sensitive. And if I were to apply the same thing to their fear of snakes, which somebody brought a giant snake into a speech class that I took, and me and the guy who brought the snake were the only ones sitting in the room to watch his presentation, and the teacher, because they had to, everybody else cleared the room. So I think it's funny how hypocritical we can be when it's your fear and not mine. So I feel like it's the same dynamic happening with somebody who has a fear of abandonment, to tell them to just get over it or expect in 1, 2, 3, you're done. I just did the best therapy. I told you not to be afraid of it. I explained to you what this is and how it works. And to think that you're not going to still have that fear that's been wired into your frontal lobes is ludicrous. So, what do we do about it? If you and I can't get over our fears, no matter how much therapy, no matter how much we practice, no matter how much somebody rationalizes with us, how is somebody supposed to get over their fear of abandonment? Can we figure out how not to be afraid of the fears that we all have? So that concerns me, because if we can't figure out how to get over all of our fears, how is somebody supposed to get over their fear of being abandoned? And is it located, are these fears located in the same part of the brain, or is it coming from a different part of the brain? So if I feel like if there's some way to get over one fear, maybe we could apply it to getting over the fear of abandonment. And yeah, that's where I'm left with right now. What do we do with this fear that is all encompassing and really damaging to the person's entire life? It's the core of pain, fear, aggravation, and yet they have to carry this with them everywhere that they go without a whole lot of soothing. So let's go into a quick deep dive into all of this. So separation anxiety and abandonment fears are related concepts often discussed in context of emotional health. So separation anxiety, what's the definition of that? Separation anxiety is characterized by excessive fear or distress when anticipating or experiencing separation from home or primary caregivers. It's most commonly observed in children, but can also occur in adults. So the symptoms are intense worry about losing a primary attachment figure, nightmares about the separation, physical complaints when anticipating separation, and reluctance to go to school or be alone. Developmental aspect. It's a normal development stage in infants and toddlers, but can become problematic if it persists beyond typical age ranges. Triggers are usually starting school or any situation that involves separation. So, abandonment fears. Abandonment fears are defined as rooted in the fear of being rejected, left alone, or abandoned by loved ones. This fear can manifest in various relationships and is often associated with individuals who have experienced trauma or loss. So, the symptoms: intense anxiety around relationship dynamics, fear of being unwanted or unlovable, clinginess, or extreme responses to perceived rejection. Focus on relationships. Unlike separation anxiety, which centers around physical separation, abandonment fears often relate to emotional connections and the fear of losing those bonds. Common in BPD, frequent in individuals with borderline personality disorder, where the fear can lead to self-sabotaging behaviors to avoid perceived abandonment. So, key differences: the nature of the fear. Separation anxiety focuses on the fear of physical separation from caregivers or loved ones. Abandonment fears focus on emotional loss and the fear of rejection or unworthiness in relationships. Developmental context. Separation anxiety can be a normal part of child development, while abandonment fears typically stem from past experiences or trauma affecting emotional stability. Manifestation. Separation anxiety often presents as distress during separation events like school or sleepovers. Abandonment fears may lead to defensive behaviors like clinginess or reactions to perceived threats to relationships. So, now what about fear? Like I talked about, is fear of abandonment and fear of spiders in the same part of the brain. So fears such as fear of heights or abandonment fears and fear of public speaking are processed in the brain, but the underlying mechanisms and areas involved can differ. Here's a breakdown of how these fears are similar and different in terms of brain processing. So, similarities in brain processing: the amygdala activation. The amygdala plays a central role in fear processing for all types of fears. It's responsible for detecting threats and triggering the body's fight or flight response. Regardless of the specific fear, Heightened amygdala activity leads to emotional responses such as anxiety and freaking out. And let's talk about the cortex involvement. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for higher order thinking and decision making, is involved in regulating emotional responses and can influence how fears are processed and managed. Cognitive appraisal of fear, evaluating the situation, occurs here, whether the fear is physical, like heights, or emotional, like abandonment. So, how about the neurotransmitter systems? Neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin can affect the experience and regulation of fear across different types of anxiety. So, let's talk about the differences in brain processing. Types of fear. So, let's take fear of heights. Primarily linked to evolutionary survival mechanisms, it activates areas related to spatial awareness and threat detection. Abandonment fear is more connected to attachment systems and emotional memories, often involving the hippocampus for memory recall and the anterior cingulate cortex for emotional regulation. Fear of public speaking involves social anxiety and self-perception, engaging areas related to social cognition and interpersonal interactions. How about contextual processing? Acrophobia is often a straightforward threat response to a physical danger and is typically processed in more instinctual manner. Abandonment fears require deeper emotional processing, often linked to past relationships and attachment styles. And then glossophobia involves a social evaluation and fear of judgment, which engages areas related to self-awareness and social contact. So in other words, that's fear of public speaking. So coping mechanisms. The strategies to cope with these fears can differ significantly. For example, exposure therapy may be effective for acrophobia, which is your fear of heights, while cognitive behavioral therapy may be more appropriate for abandonment fears or glossophobia. So while all these fears involve the amygdala and emotional regulation systems, they activate different brain areas and processing pathways based on the nature of the fear, whether it's a physical threat, emotional loss, or social evaluation. Understanding these distinctions can aid in tailoring effective treatment approaches for each type of fear. So I'm not saying that you can't ever get over any type of fear. And I'm not saying that each fear is different and activates different parts of the brain and it activates different parts of the psyche or has a different reasoning for why it's happening. But what I am saying is that any type of fear is going to be challenging to get over. You would almost, it's almost, for the fear of abandonment, I do think that you have to decide that you want to get over the fear instead of letting it completely control you. But again, much easier said than done. So, what are your solutions? What have you found that actually works? And do you agree or disagree with what I'm saying? That it's all, at the end of the day, a fear. Hi, everyone. I've poured my passion into 3 powerful books on Amazon, each designed to help you level up your mindset, relationships, and success. The Workplace Narcissist. Learn how to spot toxic personalities fast and protect your peace, confidence, and career at work and protect your love life. From ENFJ with Love. Dive into all 16 Myers-Briggs personality types through the eyes of an ENFJ and discover powerful insights to better understand people, connect deeply, and strengthen every relationship in your life. And finally, flip the script on love. Take control of your love life with winning strategies that turn dating into a clear path toward lasting commitment. Links in the description box.